Ellie, hello, how are you?
Hi, Andy. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. It's great to have you here.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're delighted. We're asking contributors to introduce themselves and then just give us an overview of their work. So would you mind doing that, please?
Yeah, of course not. My name is Ellie Kurttz, and I'm theater photographer. I've been photographing theater and dance for the past 18 years, um, mainly uh, Shakespeare productions somehow. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 18 years and working mainly with Royal Shakespeare Company, National Theatre, Hampstead, Globe. Yeah.
Great, wow. And that means your work has been documenting some of the kind of big mainstream major UK Shakespeare productions of the last couple of decades, which is quite extraordinary, right?
Yes, and has been fantastic. And I just to have that experience, that also like I photograph not only the production but also the rehearsals.
Mm,
So it's just really wonderful just to be able to go and see when the play starts. Sometimes I'm there for the first reading.
mm,
So it's I find an honor and a privilege to be able to witness all that process
mm.
from the moment that it starts until it goes to the stage.
And beyond, because you then give the shows an afterlife. You know,
Yes,
we access the
yeah,
show when it's finished
exactly.
via your work.
Yeah.
That's
And
amazing.
it's just wonderful just to go back and just to have this archive of fantastic productions.
Yeah,
Because once it's finished, the show is photos and video that is left, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm excited to speak to you for lots of different reasons, and the first is that I just love your work. So just on
Thank
that
you.
basis alone, I'm very excited. But I'm also aware that our videos will be being watched by people interested in literature and who are used to thinking of literature as something written down in a book, a text, words, and you give us literally a snapshot of literature from a completely different point of view, which takes us away from words and towards the visual image. And the third reason I'm excited to speak to you is a lot of our videos have been about the past and about how you access history as a researcher and the importance of the archive. And as you've just said, you are yourself a kind of archive producer. You are documenting these productions
Yeah.
which otherwise get lost. And many of my colleagues will be using your work to recover productions which otherwise they have no access to. I think that's really exciting for those three different reasons to get you in conversation. Do you mind telling
Yeah.
us a little bit about that, about that second issue I raised, about what it's like to work visually with a medium which often people think about in terms of text? Does that make sense
Mm-hmm.
as a question?
Yeah, it does. Um, I think I told you this story before because when I started photographing, especially Shakespeare, my English was very basic, and my access actually to Shakespeare was very little. Like I didn't stud him in school because it was not part of my curriculum.
Mhm.
So when I first time I started photographing Shakespeare, I realized I couldn't really understand the words. So what I did, I actually connect to the feeling of the play to be able to photograph the moments, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to tell the story of the play in one shot, basically. So for me to be able to do that, I literally had to connect myself to the feeling of it, which in the beginning was like a kind of the only thing that I could connect to, because the words were just um, so above my understanding, because English is not my first language. And so connecting to the feeling, I was able kind of really connecting, I think, to the core of the play, I guess, because once I did the job, everyone loved it and everyone felt that was quite refreshing, because I was not connecting to the words because I couldn't understand them. And this process is what I carry with me throughout. So now when I'm photographing, um, even though I suppose my English got much better, I hope, um, I still connect to the feeling of the play. So when I'm photographing, I almost switch it off from the words, uh, and I just keep my intention to photograph the feeling and what's happening on the stage through the feeling of it.
Yeah.
And it's something that has been with me ever since. I think it has enriched my work.
Okay.
The fact that I connect to the feeling, because once I don't have the words there for me to connect, it's much more freely what I can do visually. And then, and of course, when I have a chance, which is wonderful, I go back and I watch the production without camera, without that, the lenses in front of me, without anything. And then I connect to the words. And it's always a wonderful experience, and it's always really new. So it's really funny because I work on the production from the beginning to the end. And then when I go and watch it, we're like, wow, this is fantastic. I didn't realize how wonderful it was, the words and the script and everything.
Yeah, thank you very much. I love that for lots of different reasons, and I guess it's important to say that even for people whose first language is English, I think the majority of people have the same experience with Shakespeare of going, what on earth is this? What are people saying? What is this language? And often the performers that you're photographing are trying to translate the older English into a style which will resonate and be meaningful for a contemporary audience. So there's kind of a different kind of mediation going on there, almost like the way a camera or the camera screen is a kind of mediation. The people you're photographing are also working with the language and trying to translate it in their body, in their gesture, in their relationships with each other and the audience, and then you're documenting that process.
And something that I find always really beautiful is seeing the actors when they get the words, when they get the play, and they are learning lines and studying, they get those words into them, and almost become like almost a choreography, you know? Yeah. It's like everything, all the body and everything talks about. Like you can feel the words through their bodies, and maybe that's where I connect, like, because I see the words through their bodies, like through their movement and through their physicality. Yeah. And emotion, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Physicality and choreography are so important to performance, and they so often get lost by people who are thinking about literature as a text. So as I say, that's really important to me that we talk about this. There's a contemporary of Shakespeare's called Thomas Middleton, and he writes a poem about actors learning their lines for the first time. And he says actors are like spiders with their limbs going everywhere as they're trying to learn the text, and their arms are going crazy like this. And you learn words by moving your body and gesturing.
Yeah, it's true. I so many times I worked with Cicely Berry. Yeah, and it was just fantastic to be in the same room with her, seeing how she works.
So can we tell our audience who Cicely Berry is?
Cicely Berry, she used to be the director of voice at the RSC for few decades. Yeah, a long time. She passed 2 years ago, and it was just fantastic because she wanted the actors to move. You know, it was not static. Her workshops were never static. There's always lots of walking and reading, talking. And when it changed the punctuation or she would change movements, people would change movements. So that's why I got that feeling, oh, actually, in my mind, the text becomes part of the actor's body and not choreography. And that's where I try to photograph. That's where I try to connect.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. We're talking to Alison Bomber in a future video, and we're hoping to post your video and Alison's together.
Ah, fantastic.
Alison will be talking about text and voice.
Yeah, I love her work. I love her work.
Me too.
And she's fantastic.
Well, that idea of words as movement, I think, is really exciting. You talked about trying to capture the feeling of the play in one shot. Can you tell us more about that? Are you trying to capture story and narrative? Are you trying to capture something about the play as written down? Are you trying to capture the production in front of you? Are you trying to capture something about the actor in front of you?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to capture the story itself, which sounds a little bit is a big thing to capture in one image. But I think ultimately that's what I'm aiming for.
Right.
Is to tell a story and to tell what's happening in one image. And of course, like everything else in life, sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not, because sometimes everything happens so fast. I have to be very aware. So that's why I said to you, like when I connect to the feeling and the words are not there, it sounds odd to say, but it's like the distraction of me hearing is not there anymore, because I kind of shut down and I just see things in front of me. But then once the words come, it's just, it completes the experience. And I'm always very grateful when I have a chance to go and see it. So that's what ultimately what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to capture the story in one image. Yeah.
I've been lucky. Go on, sorry.
No. You know, sometimes you're more successful than other times, but there's always a trial.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough to see you in action at the Globe, in front of a thrust stage. And even with a fantastic production, it's always difficult not just to watch you at work, because it's just amazing watching you stalking around the stage looking for the right shots coming along. It's amazing watching you, you know, hunting that live moment that you can capture forever. It's
you know what, it does feel like that sometimes. I think Michael Boyd told me once that he feels like I'm a hunter. I'm always like on the, you know, but that's how I feel I have to be, just to capture that little moment. And because I always feel it's a big responsibility to try to not translate, of course not, but try to capture an image that is strong enough that people gonna want to use as their image to show their show. You know, their production is like, so is a big responsibility, and I always try to do the best that I can, because I love theater. And I think since that time when I started 18 years ago, without being able to speak much more than a few words in English, you know, I think I've just developed this immense love for theater, which I always had because I grew up on the stage as well. I used to be a ballerina.
Wow. Okay.
So I always been on the stage, but I always been in theaters. That's where I feel familiar, and that's where. So it was a transition from being on the stage to being on the audience, photographing the stage. And I think my love for theater has just grown, and for the words as well. You know, it's really lovely. And I think when I worked with you, you actually send me the play before, which is something else that's so fantastic when I get to read. But don't forget, when I watch, I just switch it off when I'm photographing.
I love it. I love the idea of you as a story hunter.
Yeah, excellent.
Are there obvious differences between photographing theatre and photographing dance?
Yeah. There are.
Tell us about those.
Yeah, of course. Massive difference, because one thing about both were like these two type of works, theater and dance, you have no control of what's happening. So I think it's not for all photographers. If you're a photographer that you want to have control of the shoot, you shouldn't do theater or dance, because you go into a job, you have no idea the light conditions, you have no idea how well lit the play is going to be. During the play, while you're photographing, you don't know the staging, you don't know where the actor is coming from, or if it's, you know, coming from above, or you have no idea. And you don't know when this scene is going to change, because not depending on the show, if they do 2 runs, I'm able to watch the first run, and that is always really helpful. But some shows don't have the luxury of time to be able to do 2 runs. So I go in on the first run. Sometimes they just do 1 run and then they open the first preview a few hours later. So sometimes we just don't have the luxury to watch all the technical and creatives. You don't have the luxury to watch this show before and then do the final run. So it all happens at once. So if you go in, think like as a photographer, now I'm mainly for the photographers, thinking that you're going to have any control, forget it. So you have to be a type of photographer that are happy with having no control and just going with the flow. You don't know if you're going to have space to walk around. You don't know if the director is going to be okay with you walking around. Some directors might not want someone moving in the audience, even though if you try to be very discreet and quiet, but it's still a movement. So you have to adapt. You have to adapt to the situation. And with theater, I think there is a little space of time, also depending on the production, but there is a little bit more space for you as photographer to get into the image. In dance, it's just so fast.
Yeah.
You know, in dance, it's extremely fast. So you just don't have them. You can't really. And also, if anything goes wrong, if you miss, you know, a great jump or something, you never can go back to it. You never can ask like, oh, can we redo that again? Or you can never stop the scene. You can never do. So it's certain type of photographers that can do this type of work.
Yeah.
And for me, I find very exciting, to be honest. I kind of enjoy not to have that control. I work as well in the studio. I do portraits and studio photography, and then it's different. You got control of everything. You control the light, you control the move. But when you go into to photograph a production, you have no control. You have no control. But it's something that I find interesting, that you just feel part of something bigger.
Yeah.
If you're part of a company, if you're part of, and go up like to the feeling part of, you know, with Shakespeare, with the writer, whoever creates that piece. You just, I think for me, it feels much bigger.
Yeah.
Than photographing myself in the studio. You know, that's why I love theater. I love to do production photography, because I have no control, but I feel like I'm part of something much bigger than myself.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ellie. That's really helpful. I'm lucky enough to have your book here, so I have examples of your work here you're speaking.
Yeah. That was Titus Andronicus from Ninagawa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was part of the Complete Works Festival at the RSC in 2006 to 2008. Was it? Yeah. Because during that time I was the official photographer so I photographed all the shows. So that was a fantastic time, running from one theater to another. And then sometimes the run would be late, so I would have had to go running from one in Stratford, like from the other place to this one to the RST, and on the way back running. And every time running takes some photos, so I wouldn't be able even to stay for the full run, because I had 3 runs at the same time. Wow. Yeah, all that. I love that. It was great.
Do you mind talking?
Again,
Go on, sorry. Do you mind talking?
No, I was going to say, you know, if you're like a photographer that wants control, like to have 3 jobs at the same time is not the best.
No. Do you mind talking us through one of the images from your book?
Yeah, sure. I think I've got the book as well.
You can pick which one.
Maybe this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
What page is that?
And this was Winter's Tale. And this, I was not the main photographer for this show. I was part of as I was the artist in residence for the RSC at that time.
Yeah.
And I was documenting everything. I went, because I just thought that was a fantastic production. So I asked them just to go and photograph. And you can actually see the other photographer, the photographer that was doing the productions there.
Wow. And
so I did from the balcony. And I just felt like I just want to give this a feeling of a painting. So you can see that it's quite blurry.
Yeah.
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 Just because I felt I was not photographing for the theater. So sometimes when that happens, you just feel a bit more enticed to be creative. And so the image that, you know, it feels blurry, and it's just, I love the feeling to it that has just that blur. Another image that this is you know, this one was so intense, the show. Did you see it?
Yeah, I did a couple of
It was
times.
fantastic, wasn't
Amazing.
it? And all the colors, and it was all white, gray, black, and some red. Yeah. So all the show was like that. I have another one here, and I remember being so into photographing the show, like loving so much. Another one of the same show. Yeah.
Oh yes.
That was the colors, but do you remember the set was all pure white? And I remember photographing, looking so much like through the lenses and focusing so much that once it's finished, I just had to lay flat on the floor of the theater and close my eyes, because it was so intense.
Wow.
The play was so intense, and you know, it was quite overwhelming. I think that production for me was really overwhelming, and I think that's why I chosen that image to be the cover of my book, because this image of Lavinia having, you know, I just find it extremely powerful. For me, this show was very powerful as well. The fact that once it finished, I just had to lay flat on the floor of the theater and just rest and close my eyes and feel like, oh my God, what has happened here? Because it's a very intense production and so beautiful.
Absolutely. And those two images are very different than what two you've asked us to look at, because one is crystal clear, and then, as you said, the other one is very blurry. And in the blurry one, you're capturing the movement across the stage of lots of bodies. And in the Nina Gower, you're capturing this incredibly kind of almost epic archetypal body position, body shape of one person. Yeah. And there's movement in that image, but the movement isn't blurring the quality of the image.
No, it's very sharp. But I think also the richness of the color. For me, that image kind of tells me the story. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but it's just so intense. So I'm looking at the book that I put on the floor. It's just so intense that when I saw it when I edit, and I think there's something else that I find when I'm editing. So once I finish and I'm editing, when I edit, I go quite fast through the image. And when there is an image that makes me feel something, I choose. Right. Yeah, and I think that's how I feel like my process is just trying to connect. You know, if I see something, this brought something to me, or then I choose that image. If it's something that I'm a bit dubious and I feel like I'm not sure, then I leave it, because I think an image, especially in theater, it needs to be strong enough to make you feel something when you see it.
Right. So part of your technique when you're in the theatre is not trying to get the perfect shot, but to take lots and lots of shots. And then the second stage is the editing and the choosing of a shot.
Yeah, maybe I don't take loads and loads. I just kind of wait for when I feel is right. But after that, I still edit, and I just choose the ones that I had a connection with. Yeah. When I see on the screen, on the computer, I had a connection with. Yeah. And it's exactly that. It's having that feeling of I can see the play through this image. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you. That's great. I was about to ask you that. You've ended where I wanted to ask you next, which is about that idea again of capturing a story or a play in a single image. Talking to people like fight directors and to people who use combat as a form of storytelling, such as professional wrestlers, they talk a lot about visual storytelling and storytelling in the absence of dialogue or of text. And you too are engaged in visual storytelling, but unlike a choreographer, you don't have movement to play with. You can capture movement, but you're working for a medium which doesn't do time. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit about that, how you capture a story in a single image.
I think photographers are, it's much harder, of course, than filmmakers, because filmmakers you can tell that story through. But with photographers, you have to be bold enough to shoot at that moment when you feel that is the right moment, because once that is gone, it's gone. So the ultimate moment, you just have to make that decision and photograph now and then, because there is never a second chance. So in a way, and also, like, if you think too much, you might miss the moment. If you think like, oh, this, and that's why I feel like you have to connect to something else, because you can't be too literal, like feeling, oh, this is that moment is coming, because now, of course, now I know all the place. I know when the moments are coming or not, and when the big moments are. But in the beginning, I didn't know, like, I've been to, first time I watched Julius Caesar, so for me it was all a novelty.
Yeah.
So you have to connect something else to be able to click at the right time. It's not about being perfect. It's not about being being focused sometimes, but I think it's the moment. And when I was studying, I was doing my course here. Remember my teacher always saying, like, it's not the decisive moment, is not the perfect moment, but it's the moment that has a feeling. So I think that's what I feel. I feel like my work is not perfect. To be honest, I find my photos not perfect at all. But I think they just bring that life is not perfect. So it's just that brings that feeling of, you can connect to that image, because sometimes it's quite chaotic.
Yeah.
And I think, once I gave an interview, they asked me, like, what, because I'm from Brazil, like, what do you feel being Brazilian has brought to my view to the theater? And I feel like, my country can be quite chaotic, and I think in that chaos is what I brought to my image. But somehow it just brings something to us that is easy to connect. Our life is not perfect. Like, Shakespeare plays were not perfect. They were perfect literally, but the stories is quite strong stories, quite chaotic, and I love to connect that chaos as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking through your book as we're talking, and one thing I'm struck with is how much chaos you capture and how brilliantly you capture it, but also how frequently the images do not show people speaking, and that it's images of people doing something other than speaking, which again and again get picked up in your work. I'm looking at page 27, for example, and this extraordinary image here.
Yeah. Kate.
Yeah.
Kate Stevens.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
Which in some ways shares some similarities as a kind of moment, a narrative moment.
Interesting that you ask that, because I always feel as well, sometimes it's between the lines that there is an energy,
Wow.
I always feel like sometimes it's the downtime.
Yeah.
That there is an energy that is there available for me to capture.
Yeah.
So let me see. Yeah. Even that one as well, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was before anything. And David just went to the mirror and look for us to see if would be a good. So he was just kind of testing. And I photographed, and I came to Greg and I said, I think I photographed your the cover. I think I just did the shot of the cover. And that was like a little moment. That was basically David before, he was just thinking the line.
Yeah.
Was not what was coming next. And I always find these little moments is when I can get almost like, it's that connection of the character and the actor, maybe, and that's where I feel the photos can be quite strong. Yeah.
And that's David Tennant playing Hamlet at the RSC. Have I got that right?
Yeah. But that was during the film. That was I did the stills for the film as well.
Right.
Oh, this one that I saw it.
Yeah, extraordinary.
That is really strong. And again, it's that commotion when he arrived. There is no one actually speaking. Yeah.
And that's Titus Andronicus at the Globe. Is that right? No, was it?
No, that was Macbeth.
Excuse me.
Lucy Bailey's Macbeth.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. And actually, when he said that, like, sometimes people not speaking. No, I do photograph people speaking as well. But I think this one I love this one.
Yeah. But I suppose what I'm struck by is how often the camera is drawn towards big production moments. So moments in which the production is also trying to set up. I mean, it's in some ways it's an obvious thing to say, but it's catching moments where the production is looking to be particularly visually striking. Are the moments which grab you, and often those moments are, as you say, between the lines, sort of off text. That's very interesting. I think about where you we were talking earlier about you producing an archive for future people to look at the production, that we see it through those particular moments.
Yeah, and also the thing maybe is between the lines again, because when I said to you before, I'm focusing the visual of the play. So quite often I find those moments that people are not speaking quite deep, because like they've kind of lost in thoughts, or just about to go into another line, or the character is transitioning. I like the transitions as well, because I think energetically there is something else there.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's very important for me as someone who works on the writing of this period that often the stage energy is not where the writing is, it's not where the text is, it's not where who is speaking is, but that moment of downtime of the people who are between lines. I think that's really helpful.
I think the downtime, I'm kind of drawn to that moment.
Ellie, this has been fantastic. Thank you very much. We're finishing our conversations by asking our contributors what the word literature means to them. And I wonder if you have any thoughts, given that you're someone who photographs literature for a living. We've talked about the contradictions and the paradoxes of doing that. Is that a useful word to you?
For me, literature it reminds me of something literate. And that's what the word comes from, isn't it? I don't know. I don't think I said that correctly.
You've been great. It's really fascinating, Ellie. There's no right answer. It's really interesting to hear your point of view.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, I just find the word literally a little bit too severe.
Okay.
Severe and quite too straight, like kind of too. Yeah, it's literate.
Yeah, it discourages playfulness. It discourages people from playing and being relaxed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it'll be a bit, in my idea, I feel literature is quite light for me. It could be light and could be a bit fun. So I find the word itself to describe what it is, I find a little bit too, a bit too hard, a little bit too serious.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really interesting, Ellie. It's been the most fantastic conversation. I've really loved talking about your photographs. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you. It has been lovely to be here with you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.